Up next in the broadcast, marking her first year in office, President Park Geun-hye unveils an ambitious 3-year economic plan to allow the nation to reform and innovate its way to per capita income of $40,000 by 2017. The two Koreas closed the first set of cross-border family reunions to be held in over 3 years. With the event being viewed as a success, are warmer relations soon to follow? And hazardous air pollution from dangerous levels of dust particles continues to choke the nation. Authorities issue advisories to stay indoors as residents wait for the rain. Primetime News begins now.
대통령으로서의 직책을 성실히 수행할 것을 위해 투자에 제거하겠습니다. 우선 농지, 상지 등에 대한
Good evening to you all and welcome to Primetime News. It's Tuesday, February 25th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Geun-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin with President Park Geun-hye's 1-year anniversary of her inauguration when she became Korea's 11th president and the first ever female leader of the nation.
And on this Tuesday, to mark the occasion, President Park laid out the details of her 3-year economic innovation plan. Here's our presidential office correspondent, Eoh Jin-joo.
Reunification of the two Koreas will be a bonanza. In line with this comment made in her New Year's address, President Park announced plans to set up a presidential reunification preparation committee to seek out ways to bring about what she called a systematic and constructive reunification.
이곳에서 한반도의 통일을 준비하고 남북 간의 대화와 민간 교류의 폭을 넓혀갈 것입니다.
The committee will operate beyond the purview of the Unification Ministry, with experts and civic groups from various sectors, ranging from foreign affairs and security to the economy and culture, drawing up a specific blueprint for a unified Korea. In her 3-year economic innovation plan unveiled in Tuesday's address, President Park vowed to raise the nation's potential economic growth rate to above 4% and per capita income to $40,000 by the year 2017. She put forth 3 goals: creating an economy with strong fundamentals, making an innovative and dynamic economy, and establishing an economy that balances domestic demand and exports. The president said she will start with rooting out abnormal policies and wrong practices, especially in the public sector. President Park pledged to reduce and cap the debt ratio of public institutions at 200%, which is the upper limit for private companies to issue corporate bonds. The Korea Land and Housing Corporation, for example, which has debts of more than $128 billion, had a debt ratio of over 400% as of last year. And for an innovative economy,
이것을 포함해서 창업 벤처 생태계 조성을 위해 향후 3년간 4조 원 규모의 재정을 투입하겠습니다.
She also promised to increase investment in research and development to 5% of the country's GDP by 2017. Boosting domestic demand comes as an important part of her goal for a balanced economy. The president set a target of reducing the nation's household debt ratio by 5 percentage points by 2017 by handing out tax benefits and introducing fixed interest rates and level debt services for mortgage loans. Eoh Jin-joo, Arirang News.
And to assign a grade to President Park's performance over the past year and to analyze the new 3-year economic blueprint announced today, we're joined by Dr. Lee Tu-won, professor of economics from Yonsei University. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Now, Dr. Lee, President Park came into office a year ago with a strong emphasis on revitalizing the economy. Now, if you were to give her a grade, what grade would you give her in terms of the economy?
Well, to tell you the truth, her record for the first year was rather disappointing. If you look at the growth rate, that's something like a 2.8%, which was substantially lower than the potential growth rate of Korea. And the original idea of her economic vision was to achieve the employment rate of 70% by relying on two policies of economic democratization and creative economy. However, employment rate has been hardly changed, and most of the survey says that she actually did a good job in terms of diplomacy and security issues, but in terms of the economic matters, her record was disappointing.
Well, marking her one-year anniversary, she did unveil a 3-year economic blueprint today. What stands out about this plan to you?
Well, it seems like that she is trying to recover from this disappointing first-year record in terms of economy. Well, what it stands out is that she proposed basically 3 key strategies, including the establishment of fundamentally strong economy, and promote domestic demand, and also keep the balance between domestic demand and export. And in order to achieve these strategies, she proposed 9 action plans. But if you look at those 9 action plans, basically there's nothing substantially new in those plans. But it's kind of a summary of major policies that had been proposed so far.
So if implemented very well and executed, do you expect this new blueprint to make up for the shortcomings for the past year?
Yes, I think so. If those 9 action plans are well implemented, I'm pretty sure that that's going to make a big difference. However, as people used to say, the devils are always in detail. Now, if you look at the detail of those 9 action plans, there are a couple of problems. Now, some of those policies may face some resistance from the interest group. And also, one policy may have conflict with the other policies. So when you have a conflict like this, it'll be up to the president or up to the deputy prime minister to coordinate these policies.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about those interests that may serve as obstacles to some of the implementation. A lot of her plan, aside from innovation, rests on reform and changing the status quo. Do you think these changes have a chance of succeeding?
Well, they are difficult to achieve. Reforming public sector, for example, reforming large companies' business practices, reforming labor markets. Almost every previous regime tried to introduce reform in these sectors, but unfortunately, not many succeeded. So it will depend on the determination of the president and the cabinet, and also it will require a very meaningful cooperation from the opposition party in the National Assembly.
All right, Professor Lee, thank you so much for your insight, and maybe we can get a midterm report card in the middle of the year. Thanks so much.
Good to be here.
After nearly a week of highly charged emotions, the two Koreas wrapped up their 2 rounds of reunions for war-separated families at North Korea's Mount Kumgang.
The families, many of whom are advanced in age, said their tearful goodbyes, which raises the question of whether they will ever be given the right to meet again. Arirang News Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sang-hee reports.
It was an emotional day at North Korea's Mount Kumgang on Tuesday as the two Koreas wrapped up their first reunion event for war-separated families in more than 3 years. For most, this could be the last time to see their families living on the other side of the border, as many are already over the age of 80. The 6-day event was conducted in 2 rounds, with the first 3 days arranged by South Korea and the final 3 days arranged by the North. Experts say this rare show of cooperation between the Koreas could lead to a broader thawing of inter-Korean ties.
It signifies the first step for improving inter-Korean ties and serves as a foundation for holding the family reunions on a regular basis, and an occasion to show the world that the two Koreas can solve problems through dialogue.
Upon holding a successful reunion event, the two sides had agreed to address additional humanitarian issues, such as making the family reunions a regular event and sending food and medical aid to the North. Such efforts come in line with President Park Geun-hye's principle of approaching softer issues before addressing more serious matters, like North Korea's nuclear program. Experts say if the Koreas maintain the momentum for dialogue, the possibility of a North Korean provocation is low.
Reflecting on previous cases, there was almost no provocation by North Korea when there was inter-Korean dialogue or cooperation. Even if there was, it was resolved very quickly.
On the second day of the joint military drills between South Korea and the United States, North Korea has yet to criticize its southern neighbor. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, while the two Koreas were conducting inter-Korean family reunions, a North Korean military patrol ship crossed the maritime border in the West Sea 3 times between just before 11 p.m. Monday night and 3 a.m. Tuesday morning.
South Korea's defense ministry announced on Tuesday that the North Korean vessel crossed back and forth beyond the northern limit line, the de facto maritime border between the two Koreas, on 3 separate occasions, venturing as far as 3.5 kilometers into the zone. The South Korean military sent high-speed patrol boats to the area after warnings were ignored by the North, although there were no skirmishes. The boat turned back at around 2:30 this morning. The ministry says that it is highly likely that the North sent the boat to the area on purpose since it ignored warnings and lingered for quite a long time. The nation's umbrella labor union staged simultaneous rallies across the country on this Tuesday in protest against the Park Geun-hye administration.
Our Connie Kim explains what they are rallying for.
The 1-year anniversary of President Park's inauguration was not met with celebration by the nation's unions. Some 40,000 angry workers from the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions turned out in force at Seoul Plaza on Tuesday afternoon to demand that President Park Geun-hye step down. They claim her administration has been oppressing workers and moving to privatize public firms. The union workers later staged a walkout protest through central Seoul before returning to the plaza to hold a candlelight vigil. Currently, 1,400 police are on site with water cannons at the ready should the protesters get out of hand. The afternoon rally follows similar ones throughout 12 cities earlier on Tuesday. In the morning, members of the Korean Railroad Corporation staged a 1-day walkout. They're demanding that the state-run railway operator withdraw charges against unionists who took part in a strike in December, which was launched in protest of a government plan that would create a subsidiary to run a high-speed train line. The union claims the plan is a first step toward the privatization of Korail. Despite the protests, there were no inconveniences caused in railway operations since Korail had planned ahead and dispatched some 1,800 replacement workers. The greater protest, organized by the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, was expected to draw some 200,000 people, but just 50,000 took part, mainly because the core labor union of Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors decided not to join in. The government has warned of stern measures against those taking part in what it calls an illegal walkout and notified citizens to take public transportation to avoid traffic jams caused by the protests on the streets. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, shifting our focus, 1 quadrillion won, or roughly $950 billion US. That's how high household debt in Korea reached as of the end of last year.
And it's a hike of $25 billion from just 3 months earlier. Data released on Tuesday by the Bank of Korea suggests that a jump in housing transactions largely explains the quarterly increase. Household credit growth picked up at its fastest pace in 7 quarters in the 4th quarter of 2013. Thanks to government measures that boosted housing transactions, which surged even more in January. Household credit refers to credit purchases and loans for households that have been extended by savings banks and commercial lenders. Korea's Olympic squad returned home this Tuesday to a hero's welcome. Some came back sporting medals, some didn't, but they all came back looking ahead to 2018 when Korea's resort town of Pyeongchang will play host to the Games.
Our Sochi 2014 correspondent Song Ji-sun went out to welcome the athletes herself and the Olympic flag.
Home sweet home. Whether returning with medals or without them on Tuesday, all the Korean athletes were welcomed with cheers from home fans after landing at Incheon Airport.
We returned from Sochi with 8 medals overall. We finished in 13th place in the medal count, falling short of our initial goal of being in the top 10. But all the athletes gave it their best, especially the female Olympians.
The underachievement could have been disappointing, considering the efforts input over the past 4 years. But figure skater Kim Yeon-ah is content, despite winning silver in an event many believe she should have won gold in.
I'm just glad that it's all over now and that I was able to show all that I prepared through the tough times. I still can't believe it's all over now.
And those that made a successful debut are already picturing themselves at the next Games.
I'm grateful I won medals of all colors. I want to prepare well over the next 4 years and do even better at Pyeongchang.
The Olympic flag from Sochi was also on board the same plane as the athletes and will call the provincial office of Pyeongchang its new home starting later this week.
The run-up to Pyeongchang has begun. All eyes are now on us, and we study everything from Sochi. We will showcase Korea, a developed country now, 3 decades after hosting the Seoul Summer Games in 1988.
Both the winter sports athletes and the Pyeongchang organizing committee came back from Sochi with some lessons learned about how to host some memorable games and make the stay at home their own. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News, Incheon.
Now on to the latest developments in Ukraine. The country's interim leader, Alexander Turchinov, has delayed the formation of a new government until Thursday.
This comes as Russia stepped up its rhetoric against the opposition. Our Paul Yi reports.
Ukraine's new interim president, Alexander Turchinov, says the appointment of a new unity government will be delayed for just a few more days, amid intense ongoing consultations on the future direction of the country. Turchinov told legislators in parliament that a national coalition must be elected on Thursday. He had previously set the deadline to form a new cabinet and prime minister on Tuesday. The empty seats in government, however, will likely be filled quickly, so officials can seek economic assistance to stave off default and rebuild a path towards European integration. Russia, meanwhile, issued its strongest response yet on Tuesday, denouncing the removal of President Viktor Yanukovych and questioning the legitimacy of the opposition. Moscow's Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said Ukraine's interim authorities are the result of an armed mutiny. In response, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations held a press conference in New York and said the change in government was carried out through constitutional means.
Against this background, the former Speaker of Parliament resigned, and the Parliament, by overwhelming constitutional majority, elected new Speaker from the opposition, Alexander Turchinov. Thus, the assertion that in Ukraine there was a coup is at least absurd.
Law enforcement authorities in Ukraine are still searching for ousted President Yanukovych after a warrant for his arrest was issued on Monday over charges of killing 82 people, mainly peaceful protesters. In the meantime, the Ukrainian Central Election Commission has already begun its campaign for snap presidential elections on May 25th. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
We now take a look at what else is making headlines around the world with our Yu Lian standing by at the News Center. Lian, so what is making headlines?
Hi guys, let's start with China's criticisms on Japan's territorial disputes with its neighboring countries. China's foreign ministry spokesperson said during a press briefing on Tuesday that Japan's territorial disputes are closely tied to the country's past acts of aggression and colonial rule. The spokesperson called on Japan to reflect on its past and earn the trust of its Asian neighbors through practical behavior. Although China has been turning up the volume about Japan's claims to disputed islands in the East China Sea, this is a rare move to indirectly stand also with Korea. Japan continues to make repeated claims to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island. The world's biggest mobile phone trade show is in full swing over in Barcelona. On the first day of the Mobile World Congress Monday, the tech industry's biggest names brought out their biggest guns, with Samsung Electronics being no exception. The Korean tech giant rolled out its Galaxy S5 smartphone, complete with a larger display and 16-megapixel camera. It also unveiled a new smartwatch and fitness band, in a clear indication that the battleground for the smart world is shifting from the hand to the wrist. Now, the United States is reviewing its relationship with Uganda today after the country signed into law a bill that criminalizes homosexuality. Defying protests from Western donors and a warning from the U.S., Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni signed the law on Monday, meaning some homosexual acts are now punishable by life in prison. The White House issued a statement saying President Museveni has taken Uganda one step backward.
Is that we are undertaking a review of our relationship with Uganda in light of this decision.
Washington is one of Uganda's largest donors and gives the nation more than $400 million in aid each year. That's all from me for now, and I'll be back tomorrow with the stories making headlines around the world.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. Now let's start things off on the greens with ladies golf, where top-ranked pro Park Geun-hye continues to show why she's always the favorite to win any tournament she enters. Now Park, who's averaged 10.3 points in 61 outings, retained her place as the world's #1 golfer for the 46th week in a row. She was able to reinforce her spot after a second-place finish in Thailand in her first start this year. Meanwhile, Suzanne Petterson, Stacey Lewis, Lydia Ko, and Yoo So-yeon round out the top 5. And moving on to Major League Baseball, the top office has enacted a new rule that aims to reduce collisions at home plate and its related injuries. Simply put, it prohibits base runners from running outside the line and making unnecessary contact with the catcher, and catchers from blocking the runner's path when they don't have the ball. Now, it won't prevent all collisions at home, as was talked about in the past, but hopes to appease the old-school fans with its forward-thinking exceptions. Now let's get to Tuesday's top matches, starting in the Korean Basketball League. Anyang KGC faced off against the Samsung Thunders. Now both teams are looking to rebound from 2 straight losses. Samsung starts out fast, but KGC makes a run. They're up 2 at the half. Now KGC comes out strong in the third, as 7 players led by Oh Se-gun score in the period. And it's too much for Samsung, and KGC wins 86-78. Now it's the V-League. Hyundai Capital and KEPCO met in Cheonan for round 5 action. Now KEPCO looks great to start and takes the first set, but Hyundai Capital mounts a run and their defense helps them to win the next 2. Now KEPCO's offense struggles to produce crucial winners, and Hyundai Capital ekes out the home win 3-1. And that's it for now. This has been Stephen Che. Check back after midnight for more from the world of sports.
For the second straight day, the capital was under an ultra-fine dust watch, and the Seoul city government is taking action.
For more on the fine dust situation, let's now turn to our Kim Bo-kyung. Bo-kyung, I think today was one of the worst days in terms of air quality for those of us here in Seoul.
That's right, and the Seoul city government has announced that it will double operations of cleanup trucks that spray water on the roads, and it looks like they'll continue to stay busy as fine dust will continue to stick around. Now, currently Seoul is seeing 170 micrograms per cubic meter of fine dust, and levels have reached over 100 micrograms in most southern regions. Also, Cheonan is seeing 227 micrograms, which is 5 times the normal levels. So it is highly recommended that you wear masks specifically designed to keep out the fine dust. As for the weather, the southern regions are at the edge of a high pressure system, which is why it is cloudy down there. Well, tomorrow the clouds will lead to showers down south, which will hopefully wash away some of that toxic dust. Most of the southern regions will get 5 to 20 millimeters of precipitation. However, no rain is forecast in the central region, so the fine dust will remain. As for tomorrow's numbers, Seoul tops out at 15 degrees, while cities down south reach 11. Moving on to other regions, rainy Jeju peaks at 12 degrees. Meanwhile, Dokdo and Mount Kumgang make it to 10 and -1 degrees, respectively.
All right, thank you, Bo-kyung, for that. And that is our broadcast on this Tuesday night. I'm Moon Geun-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.